Right, hello everyone. Welcome to episode 10 of Down the Pub, brought to you by Wolves of Westminster, the podcast where we bring you all the topics you'll talk at the pub once you've exhausted all the other interesting ones. Once again, I am your host, Peter Simpson. I run the Haryan Gláeddyv channel and a contributor to Wolves of Westminster. Today, I am here again with Patrick Timms, the editor of Wolves of Westminster. Hello, Patrick.
Good day, sir.
And we are here also with Simon, contributor to Wolves of Westminster. Hello, Simon.
Good evening, Peter.
Good evening. Right, yesterday was the day, 2 days ago when this recording's out, actually. It's the budget. We finally got it, and barely anyone listened to Rachel Reeves because the OPR leaked the whole thing 40 minutes before she started, which obviously caused an awful lot of panic, but I brought up about 4 stories at once there, so I think we'll go through it one at a time. The main thing I'd argue, obviously, is the budget itself, because as everyone said, I'm sure you've heard it in the news and elsewhere, this was possibly the most chaotic budget and lead up to a budget that any of us have ever seen. Possibly even throughout history, this has been the most chaotic one, at least that I can think of, but you go back to the 1940s, I don't really know what budgets were like then. So there could have been worse ones, but we had U-turns, we had constant drip feeding of what could be in the budget, what isn't, and everyone mentions, I can't remember exactly who it was, but years ago there was a drip feeding of, there's going to be tax on beer in the 70s, I think this was, and the next day the cabinet minister who leaked that resigned, whereas this time round it seems everyone's been leaking all the time. So we largely knew what was in it, but there were some surprises as well. I mean, what more is there to say? There's a consensus here. What's that, Simon?
It's so much. The cabinet minister in that anecdote you just gave wasn't the cabinet minister; it was the chancellor. He ran into a journalist in the lobby, accidentally leaked that they were going to put up that tax, and then had to resign. Imagine we still had those rules, right?
Well,
the Treasury saved for the last few months is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I mean, did they have those rules back then, or was that just a more you have to do this out of honour?
It was one of those gentlemen's agreement things that Lindsay Hoyle would now be screaming about, or would be screaming about if anybody cared at this point about the president.
Well, I mean, Lindsay Hoyle seems to have been quite irritated about all this throughout the entire past few months, but nothing's happened, oddly enough. So it does.
Well, he is entitled to be
government, and then nothing actually gets done. So he just sort of screaming into the wind.
Yeah, but he is entitled to be brassed off about this.
Yeah.
He certainly, and he has made a point before of being strict with the government, and particularly Boris Johnson administration, for not doing things, shall we say, in the proper way or in the proper order. So I actually have full sympathy here with the Speaker of the House, that things were not conducted in the proper way. But what we do see is that it doesn't really seem to matter who's in charge. Things are no longer these days done in the proper way, and they should be. And the regulations or whatever it is, the procedures that we have in place are there for a reason, and they should be being done in the proper way. It would seem that with this budget, one of those, I could almost see how it got leaked, because it's one of those where pretty much everyone knew what was going to happen anyway. Not necessarily in full detail, but everyone knew the broad thrust of what was going to happen. So then we end up with the situation that we're in, and what we find is stealth taxes. We find taxes being put up in ways that are the best way of putting them up if you don't want anyone to notice, unless they're paying a great deal of attention. But they are going to find out when they look at their pay packets from April, you see. And then we also have other U-turns, like so the government was going to say, we're going to have, we're going to get rid of this, and it was a manifesto commitment to offer all workers the right to claim unfair dismissal from their first day in the job. Which is something I can certainly say in one of my former roles, of which I will not speak, would have been useful because I've done it for 6 months before they got rid of me. That would have been handy. And then they said, oh, well, we're going to get rid of that. And now they've decided they're not going to get rid of it. So it really does seem to be the case in this budget and with this government in general that nobody really knows what's going on.
Well, I mean, on top of that as well, they had the whole jury trials going to be taken away for crimes that aren't serious. And on top of that, it was recommended actually that that does happen, but you have a judge with 2 lay magistrates presiding over the rulings. But David Lammy's decided, oh no, you just need the judge, and people have brought up star chambers from the 15th to 17th century, which pretty much every historian says that was very much arbitrary judgments, and you're at risk of having that again. But then David Lammy, as Guido published a few hours ago now at time of recording, there might be a U-turn on that too. So it's just been utter madness. But I suppose it's worth properly getting into what's in the budget, because as you say, stealth taxes. First thing, the worst thing I think is the income tax, because we're now going to have frozen thresholds for over a decade. At the very least, they didn't add 2% to it, but they were going to take 2% off the national insurance, and that wouldn't have actually affected the general worker, but it will have affected pensioners and landlords. And actually, I think I'm kind of in favour of that.
I was going to say pensioners, like, yay, they're getting actually taxed for them.
But either way, in 5 years' time, I could be well within the band above, and obviously there's also the cliff edge from 50 to 60,000, but I think that only affects you if you have children, which I don't at the moment, so that's not too bad. But I could do in 5 years, who knows?
Well, I don't even know if the next government will just scrap the entire thing and just start from scratch. So yeah.
Well, it probably is a reform government next, either a majority or in coalition. If they're in coalition with the Tories as well, we're actually quite likely to see an awful lot of this scrapped. So yes, income tax will be frozen for another 3 years until 2030 to 2031, so that actually goes beyond this government. I think that's supposed to end up raising 100 billion or something over that time as well, just because of how many people are being dragged in. Plus, the minimum wage went up to £12.71 per hour, with 18 to 20-year-olds having £10.85 per hour, which is, I think, one of the most generous minimum wages in the world. You're getting quite close to that $15 minimum wage that the Democrats always talk about having, and you actually have it here, and wouldn't you know it, doesn't really help much. In fact, youth unemployment's going to go up, and employment's gone to 5%. And this is what Labour do every time, apart from maybe Tony Blair had an unemployment issue, certainly youth unemployment issue. He brought in minimum wage, for goodness sake. But they can't run an economy, really. That seems to be how Labour governments work and how they run economies. And if this is anything like the 70s, which an awful lot of people seem to incline to say it is, and I do agree with them, you're going to end up with Thatcher 2.0. So at least that's something to look forward to, gentlemen.
Well, perhaps, but with that said, I mean, it's important what you noted just earlier that they, the thing is with Labour, with New Labour, I should say, what they actually did was shunt young people into education.
Yes.
So that didn't affect the unemployment figures. But it is true to say that, yes, unemployment always goes up under Labour. This has always been true. And now we are seeing exactly the same thing again. The fact is that the Chancellor, I think, is scrabbling about to find some money to replace the money that she bunged at the trade unions for pay rises there, which they're still coming back for now.
Oh, yeah.
But at the same time, there are some things that are not dreadful about this budget. There are, when you're in the situation that the Chancellor is in, you're going to be scrabbling around for something or other. I mean, there's absolutely no surprise to me whatsoever that she's going to be scrabbling around for something. It's just very, very typically Labour what it is that they're scrabbling around to find. And then there's the U-turn after U-turn after U-turn. I do think, and I said this on the airwaves before when I was talking about who was I talking with? Oh, Kevin O'Sullivan on Talk, and he was talking about the then Shadow Education Secretary, not Education, Energy Secretary Ed Miliband, about his policies to scrap all North Sea oil and gas stuff. And what I said to him was, well, I think what Zakir is doing, as you know, a PM in waiting, is he's just going to let him own this. He's just going to let him own this, and then if it all goes to pot, well, he can say, well, he can just sack him, and in respect, and just say, oh, it wasn't me, it was him. What we might see with the Chancellor at this point is that if it is viewed widely enough, both within and outside the party, and indeed within the broader country, that this is a terrible budget, Sakir has all the political capital he can use to just sack her and replace her with someone else and say, oh, you didn't do a very good job of this. This is quite typical in politics. But from what I'm hearing from within Westminster circles, nobody's anticipating that happening anytime soon. Indeed, people, I think, are looking now to the May elections of next year, the local government elections, which is sort of the UK equivalent of the US midterms, as to how that is going to happen. But what I wanted to do, sorry, I've entered journalistic mode now. I wanted to ask you, Simon, how this kind of thing tends to work over in Poland.
How this kind of thing tends to work in terms of budgets?
In terms of the way that politicians sort of skewer each other.
Oh, it's 100 times worse. It's like what happens here on crack. You have to remember, because it's Eastern Europe and because it's a quasi-presidential system, we don't really have the decorum and the permanence that you have in Britain, right? So if you want to screw over a politician in Poland, yeah, you can really just fabricate stuff if you're kind of establishment enough. 9 times out of 10, it's corruption allegations. It's a sex thing. There's private investigators. There's all sorts of stuff. The stereotypical Eastern European nonsense that you can think of. It happens, and the media is far more partisan because we don't really have a BBC. Our version of the BBC under Law and Justice kind of became like a Law and Justice mouthpiece, right? And then what the new government did was effectively disestablished it, sold it off for pieces, and now it basically doesn't exist. So the key difference is you've got all the same tactics, but cranked up to 100, if that makes sense. And to add a more complex thing to the mix right now, our president is very much against the government. So imagine if we had Jeremy Clarkson as president, and Keir prime minister. That's what we've got going on for us right now in Poland.
That's a really good analogy, to be honest.
I think very interesting perspective. I mean, and it's interesting for us all to consider whether we're going in the same direction.
Well, never mind a hypothetical president in our country. The general public absolutely hate this government. Absolutely hate it. Most unpopular, I think, we've had in my lifetime.
Very, very sort of, I hate to use this, some very white pilling stuff today. Some of the most apolitical co-workers I have were talking about the budget and their tax bill, and these are state sector people, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
There's also somebody talking about the jury, the removal of the jury trial, which again is just like when you've got random people in the mid who just work normal state sector jobs who are dissatisfied with the government. Imagine what's going on in the rest of the country.
Oh well, I have anecdotes like that too. I was at one of my friends, they're a married couple actually, but they live in London, 2 school friends, and I went down there for a 30th for one of their 30th, sorry, and it got quite late into the night, and it was basically me, my friend, and one of his other friends that I didn't know too well. I met him on a stag do and a wedding, but we ended up talking politics because everyone knew that I run my channel and all that. And I basically just had to end up asking them, what's it going to take for you two to vote reform? And effectively they were like, they basically both said we want reform to be a bit more pro-business, which I thought, because I thought, Londoners, they'd be a bit woke, they'd be fans of Labour, but no, they were chewing Labour out, which is very good to see. So I think I made a tweet just after that saying, "Be white pill." Nick 30 Ans is starting to get it because I've always had a problem with that meme. For those who don't know what the meme, I think anyone in the know is going to know what the meme is, but not everyone in the know watches this. It's effectively a meme about how the 30-year-old professional is taxed to death to pay for things that he doesn't want to pay for. You know, paying for pensioners' holidays, paying for illegal migrants to be stuck in hotels, paying for a foreign aid for, you know, space projects in Pakistan or whatever. And they kind of all get that we're overtaxed, we should be earning more, and basically everyone has a plan to escape if it gets worse. Everyone's thinking of either moving to Australia, America, Italy's one that comes up quite a lot, Canada sometimes as well. In fact, I know people that have moved to Canada and Australia, and they both love telling me how easy life is there compared to, maybe all three of ours, to be honest with you. Which is not entirely enticing. And obviously, we also had the figures from the ONS this week about how, 100,000 plus British nationals a year leave the country, emigrate of every quarter.
Yeah.
The last 6 quarters, I think it was. Yeah.
What's even more depressing is all the Polish people leaving.
Yeah, EU people are leaving too. Yeah. Well, why wouldn't you? Poland's just a much nicer place to live from the times I've been there. Obviously. What's that?
I'll give half the population, double the land.
Well, yeah, quite. Well, I mean, give it 10 years, that might be the case in Britain as well. But hopefully we keep rather productive people, but they're all going now. I suppose the other point is that a lot of these people don't want to move, they're moving out of necessity, and if things get better, they will move back. So there's always that to bear in mind too. There may be a mass exodus, but give it 5-10 years, there could be a mass influx back. So,
well, let's recall the Wool story from June or July, whenever it was, about the whole Britannia cards thing that Zia Yusuf spearheaded, and he did, as the head of Doge, the UK version of Doge. And the trouble was, as we reported, they didn't include the self-employed in that, which is 13% of the workforce. But never mind that. It's more about saying, okay, we want to draw people back again because so many people have gone. Now, the cynical version of that is to say, we'd rather miss our fellow rich friends and their nice dinner parties that we like to go.
The wealth creators, Patrick. Yeah, let's not be too cynical.
Let's not be too cynical, but that was part of my reading of it. If I'm being quite honest with you, I was there. I was there, so it's one of those.
Undoubtedly, that is part of it. Yeah.
But as you say, it is right not to be too cynical about it, because what are they trying to do? What is the element of what they're trying to introduce here is drawing the wealth creators back to this country, because they've all buggered off. And well, not all of them, but a lot of them have indeed done so. It's also fair to say, is that all to do with the policies of this government? Well, probably not all to do with it, because in fact there have been successive policies from successive governments that have all kind of contributed to this. In terms of reform, if they get in and they are in charge and they introduce such a similar policy, well, how effective is it going to be? And that is something that journalistically, I think it is reasonable to question. It's one idea, but what I tend to find, and I'm going to make a very general point now, so if anyone from Reform is listening and just wants to slate me, well, you do that. But I mean, this is always the traditional mistake that governments make. It's also the traditional mistake that the EU makes. And in a biblical context, I am the way, the truth, and the life. Yeah, I think we all know what I mean. I think we all know what I mean.
Yeah.
When somebody tells you there is only one way of resolving this, they are not normally somebody who has your best interests at heart, and that is a general life lesson as well as a political lesson. So what I would say to people is, look, what we need is a raft of strategies for recovering the people who've left, and also for making conditions for those people more favorable than they might be elsewhere, as we've just been talking about, where life is easier, it's better, there's less crime, it's cleaner. You go to Europe, it's a lot cleaner than it is in London, I can tell you that much. But by all means, we need to be taking more pride in not just our private spaces, but also our public spaces. We need to be taking more pride in them, because at the moment, what I notice in this country is that we're not. Nobody cares. Nobody's interested, because it doesn't affect them directly. But there's a build-up and a build-up and a build-up, and eventually you're finding fag butts on the ground. You're finding discarded takeaways.
To bring it to the extreme example, that Oxfordshire next to that river, that field that was just absolutely filled with waste. That was insane. There were tons of it, and they reckon it's going to cost more than the annual budget of, I think it was the Oxfordshire Council, to actually clean the damn thing up. It needs national government help. That's how ridiculous it got. How did no one notice that? And also on top of that, all roads are there's CCTV cameras all over our roads, and they're still investigating who did this. How? It's like that.
There's no way this isn't.
It's what?
There's no way this isn't crooked. Like, you can get arrested for saying something funky on Twitter now, like within 24 hours. No way they haven't got footage of who did this.
Well, no, genuinely, I think it's incompetence as well. Because you remember that guy in London who committed that acid attack, and we just don't know where he went.
Which one? Literally, I don't even know which one.
Well, the one who disappeared, the most surveilled city in the world, and we could not find a man who accidentally melted half his face off. It's beggars belief. We're constantly told we need all this surveillance for safety, and they can't even find an acid attacker like that. It's crazy. And then obviously we just don't know who's dumped tons of rubbish next to a river. And that is actually really dangerous, because I have a background in, I did a degree in geology, and there's a big reason why we have designated landfills. It's because the land is treated to the point where no leachate can escape. Because obviously you just have trash in a place. So many pollutants come out of it due to rain, weather, wind, what have you. That's just left there. That river is going to be contaminated, and possibly all life in it dies. It could be that bad. That's why it needs to be dealt with immediately. But as far as I'm concerned, whatever criminal gang did it, they need to basically pay. They probably can't afford the whole thing, but they should never be allowed out of jail, certainly. But then we've run out of jail spaces, and they'll be released early because of this government. It's again, now I'm thinking, Canada doesn't look that bad in comparison. Maybe it's time to move. And that's your Nick 30 at the moment. And ultimately, Nick 30, the middle class, that is the person who is probably one day going to make a business in the future as well. My dad did that. He was Nick 30 back in the 80s and 90s, and now runs a small business with two of his friends. But if we all end up in Canada, Australia, all over the world, then the diaspora helps other economies rather than our own, and that's the danger we're in. I mean, we've only touched on a couple of the main points of the budget. There's a mansion tax. They're going to add a surcharge to homes valued at £2 million. I think I even heard if it was valued at £2 million in the 90s, that's a problem. At what point is the value considered? And that's only expected to raise 400 million as well. And then on top of that, we've had a 2-child benefit cap scrap, which
I think it's not going to go.
Well, that's going to cost $3 billion a year by 2030, 2.3 billion next year. This is another point about the budget. A lot of the taxes they're bringing in aren't coming into effect till 2028. 2-child benefits next April. So you've front-loaded all the costs to pay for it later. The stupid thing about this government is that the pay later is right next to a general election.
Well, that's sabotage of a potential reform government.
Well, that's true. It could be sabotage for later down the line.
Well, I think actually I'll just nip in here. I think Salman's made a very valid point there, which is that because all governments like to kick the can down the road.
Yes.
So, you're going to have to deal with this stuff now. But it's going to look like you caused this, but actually you didn't. It was the people who came before you. Now, with that said, that is definitely a tactic that can be attributed to both Labour and the Conservatives. In the past, it's like, right, we're going to do this now because it gives us some quick, quick relief.
Yeah.
But somebody else is going to have to pay for this in the future. And it's not, and when we say pay for this, we don't just mean the actual taxpayers who are actually going to have to pay for it, literally. We also mean the people who are going to have to face the political cost of being accused of mismanaging the economy. Now, with that said, we should note the fact that there is a difference between actually massively mismanaging the economy and just making other people look like they did. That it's not the same thing at all.
Well, I will say that Labour did have a fair point about Tories ruining this economy for maybe the first year. They were still blaming the Tories at this budget, and that's clearly not flying anymore. So apparently the time gap is you have about a year to actually try and fix the economy, which is actually probably too short a time scale should reform get in, especially with how bad it could potentially be by then. But then again, we say that Tories got in 2010 and under coalition government, people actually tended to actually generally support austerity as it turned out, and won in 2015 with a majority. So if Labour do crash the economy, it could actually be 10 years of reform in that case. And think over to Argentina as well. With Milei, he's just won some midterms, which nobody expected because everyone tried to blame him for the economy that the socialists ruined, and he's done quite well, as it turns out. So, yeah, it's I'd be a bit white pill, to be honest. Whether it's coalition, reform majority, whatever, it's going to be relatively right wing, relatively Thatcherite, neo Thatcherite, and I think it's going to improve everything. Because you can't really make it much worse, I'd argue. Well, actually, you can make it a lot worse, but... Go on, Simon.
Oh, we're just singing the Things Can Only Get Better song, which is a later song, but,
Well, as I've always said, I call it the clown decade. Things will get worse before they get better, but I would find it hard to say how they could get worse after 5 years.
No, this could be the absolute bottom of the pit, this budget. Who knows?
Yeah, hopefully. I'm hoping so, but my prediction is actually next year's will be worse.
Well, as I recall from officiating at the 2019 election, CCHQ was blurring out the same song, apparently, from their central office. Yeah, they were. Things can only get better. That is what they were blaring out.
That's delicious irony.
Well, it is now. It is now, isn't it? But... you can see why they were, but just to we'll move on in a second, I think, to a different point. But I'm going to, sadly, listeners cannot see this, but I'm going to hold something up to the camera, and I shall ask one of you to read part of this for me. I keep this for a very specific reason. Okay, and what this relates to is people thinking they can do something about whatever, despite not actually doing anything about anything at all. Right? So I'm going to do this now. Okay.
All right.
Now here we have.
Newspaper.
No, it's not a newspaper.
Oh yeah, you showed this last week.
Did I?
Yeah, you showed this last week. Yeah.
Okay.
Carnival for Climate Justice. Yeah, it's a social club for the Omni Clause. Yeah.
Yeah, the point being, take action against climate breakdown by celebrating global art, music, food, dance, and stories in the UK. I forgot that I showed that last week, but I think it does speak to the point.
Yes.
I think really that it's really that there are people who think they can do something about something by doing something, but then they're only doing something. It's one of those where it turns into something must be done. This is something, therefore we must do it.
It's very much just it's Glastonbury thinking, really.
Well, it is, but my point is, in fact, perhaps what we have, and perhaps we should christen this term, right here, right now, is that what we have. What we have is a Glastonbury budget.
Ooh. If we hear that over on the Daily Tea or something, one, we know they watch us, so hello Tim Stanley. Secondly,
well, do your hashtag thing, man. That's all I can say is Glastonbury budget, because that's exactly what it is.
Well, yeah, it's not. You can't even call it really virtue signaling because it is actually having an effect. The whole point of virtue signaling is that you're not actually doing anything. But yeah, because what have you got?
That changes when you're in power.
Yes, quite. Because the 2-char benefit gap. I mean, this is the other thing about this budget that every single podcast and coverage I've heard of this has been saying this was just to satiate the backbenchers who are constantly threatening to kick Starmer out. So, you know, Reeves, I think, technically only had to actually raise 6 billion in tax, and she ended up raising 40 billion or something. I don't think it was that much, actually. I think it was close to 30. To actually make up for paying for the 2-char benefit cap and for helping out energy bills. And I have to say, I'm actually in favour of this energy bill change because they're getting rid of a load of green levies, which is expected to cost about 2.3 billion. Very happy with that. I've even written a whole policy paper about this, which should be out next month. Or maybe later, I'm not sure. And then there's a scheme designed to tackle fuel poverty through energy efficiency, which has also been scrapped. And this was contributing a £150 cut from the average annual household energy bill from April. So I made this point in my video as well. Our energy market, along with a lot of our markets, aren't really free markets. They are really badly centrally controlled command economies because there's so much subsidy, so much taxing, so much decision by central government as to what can actually be invested in. Plus, with the energy price cap as well, we went from 70 energy providers to about 7 after the energy price cap was brought in by Theresa May, which was an Ed Miliband idea, by the way.
Can I just nip in and point out here?
Yeah.
This is the other thing. When they say £150 a year for the average family,
yes.
Well, I was useless at maths, and I haven't got my calculator in front of me. But can somebody divide 150 by 12?
It's just over a tenner.
Yeah, so it's like, hey, we're going to spend 150 quid a month, but actually, that is less than an average night out once per month for a single individual, and mind the family. Now, how much do you think you're actually saving people?
Bit by bit, maybe next year it will be 200.
Yeah, maybe.
I know what you mean. Well, I mean, this is one of the reasons I'm such a reform activist, because I know what they are going to make an energy market again. I remember back when we were an energy exporter. Who ruined that? Tony Blair.
Yeah. One of the good things about reform is that they are a group of people, all of whom have some niche policy area they've been banging on about for about 20 years, and they actually have an opportunity to get it right this time. Go up to Zia Yusuf and ask him about the what are they called? Nuclear reactors. Ask Zia about. He will not stop talking. I can guarantee you that.
He wants an SMR for every village.
That's SMR every county. Yeah. He wants to turn it into France in terms of energy.
Yeah, I will say another. I have to say, actually, on the green energy stuff, another highlight I had from this budget was the electric vehicles tax. For some reason, after years of saying you're not going to be able to buy internal combustion engine cars, after years of encouraging electric vehicle purchases, after finding out that most electric vehicle purchases are through Motability, which has actually been rug pulled a little bit with luxury cars, which is where most of the electric vehicles were actually bought anyway. It turns out now you've got 3 pence a mile for your electric vehicles from 2028. Again, 2 years after the caps lifted on the child benefits. And the Times have worked out that if you drive a car 8,500 miles in a year, you'll be charged £255. That means running an electric car will actually end up costing more than an internal combustion engine. The whole reason they've done that is because they've moved not everyone. They've moved, say, 10% of the population, probably 20, over to electric vehicles now. Oh my God, fuel duty revenue's gone down. We need to make that up again.
Always, this happen. I hate the fact. I'm sorry. I hate this electric vehicle stuff. The passion, because I will hopefully very soon be driving, and I've been telling people for ages that electric vehicles are a massive, massive scam. They shouldn't go near it. Look who's been vindicated. You now are going to have to pay more tax for them. Yes, Patrick. I'm sorry. I despise electric vehicles. You can continue.
Well, no, I'm.
Well, all I was going to say was that I'm being slightly older. I remember when the new Labour government told us all that we ought to buy diesel. And
wow.
they did. They literally did. They told people you must buy diesel. And then in successive governments, it was diesel that was, penalised the most because of particulate emissions and that sort of thing. You think, well, yeah, I will try to shut up because I want to give Simon some more time. But I do recall one appearance by a certain person we talked about before, and I think the presenter did counter some of his points fairly well, but then he went on to say, and I won't say what the channel was, but he went on to say, sometimes people just know stuff. And that is the most inane thing I have ever heard a presenter say. In fact, I am going to name the channel, but not the presenter. It was LBC. But what this person, the guest, was trying to say was that it's not necessarily the case that so-called experts actually know everything about everything. And the presenter just seemed to be saying, well, actually, yeah, maybe we just need to listen to the people who are designated as experts, because sometimes people just know stuff. It is literally, I wouldn't mind if you weren't live presenting on national television or radio or whatever. But the reality is that is the most inane thing I have ever heard anybody say. You look at the OBR, you look at what they've come out with, the ONS even. The people who said there would be, and not only them, the people who said it would be a disaster if we didn't join the euro, that kind of thing. Okay. And it's just absolute nonsense. That doesn't mean they can't be right. But what it does mean is they are not necessarily automatically right. So that's the only point I was going to make. I'll pass back to Simon now.
I've got nothing to say other than I think electric vehicles are a complete rubble, and people have just fallen for them. And by the way, in this country, just to let you know, the most common purchasers of electric vehicles are Uber drivers and taxi drivers, because they get a massive subsidy for it.
All right.
Well, every time you...
Sorry, this was my point before. There's no energy market. There's so many subsidies. There's so many taxes. Yeah.
It's like AI. It's a bubble.
It's honestly madness. I mean, on that, not ONS, the OBR point actually about experts getting it wrong sometimes. I'd actually suggest people listen to Tim Shipman on The Spectator interviewing the head of the OBR. I think it came out yesterday at time when this goes out. And effectively, the point that head of the OBR man said was, oh, well, of course we get things wrong. We're just making models and predictions. We're effectively like a sat-nav, but a bit of a wonky one. And I'm just thinking, if you're there to model the future in the next 5 years, and you've just admitted you constantly get things wrong, almost, he was asked really, what's the point if you keep getting things wrong? And his point back was, well, even having a wonky sat-nav that tells you about how to get to Glasgow from Swindon is better than not having anything at all. And I just thought the signpost all the way there.
The ABR now is about as useful as a horoscope. You might as well employ a wizard who's going to sit like in the top floor of Big Ben and like look at a crystal ball and say, "Oh, the markets are going to go this way."
Well, I'm not being funny, but talking about the OBR being a sat nav and me a bit of wonky sat nav that is, and using signs instead. What are the alternative signs? Oh, price signals. Load of British nationals leaving the country. Probably something going wrong there. Anecdotes of people saying, "Wow, crime seems to have gone up. I know about 10 people who've had their phones snatched in London." Oh, but look at all these statistics. People like Fraser Nelson will say, and everyone just ignores them at this point because everyone just feels depressed about the state of crime in this country and prices and how much it costs to heat your home, etc. And at the very least, it's going to be about £12 cheaper per month, I suppose. But as you say, what's £12 really going to get you? Maybe an extra 10 bags of crisps or something. I don't know. It's not much, is the point.
We are on a national scale just being gaslit. You mentioned Fraser Nelson and the crime statistics. It's just part of a massive network of people that are just lying to us through their teeth about how life actually is. And I think it's just disgraceful.
I mean, I personally have a lot of time for Fraser Nelson because I applied to do a Spectator internship and I didn't quite get it, but Fraser Nelson did send me a very, very nice email about how well I did. So that always.
I was going to nip in here and point out that James Heal, who is currently with the Spectator, well, he went for that internship 3 times before he got it.
And I've only been for it twice, so maybe Michael Gove will be a bit more partial. James Heal actually follows me on Twitter as well.
Right. But no, it's one of those where this is the thing, you know. When we talk, you know, we talk about lies, damn lies, and statistics now, don't we? So it's oh look, you know, technically you saved some money here, but the reality is, overall, you haven't, and this is one of those budgets that is, you know, it's kind of characteristic for exactly how much you're going to screw people over in in comparison to what they're going to gain vis-a-vis that, you know, and that's where we find ourselves. We find ourselves in a place where the government doesn't know how to control the spiraling debt, which is also something we haven't talked about yet, so perhaps we should.
Yes.
We should talk about the spiraling debt that we have as a country. This government, and in fairness, nor could it be said of the last one, did they know how to control that debt. I am also not confident entirely that an incoming reform government will know how to do that any better, because I am concerned that there will be, you know, rings run around them by the civil service, because they're not going to have much experience when they get that in terms of forming an actual cabinet, which is something upwards of 100 positions, when you include all the junior ministers as well. So this is something we also have to think about. Some people have said that we should move to a more presidential system, but I don't see the point in that, because I mean, there's not, you know, there's not really a point in that. There's not really a point in changing things to that extent. With that said, Mr. Farage appears to favour the notion of a presidential system, certainly in respect of how he runs his own party. So he even thinks it would be a good idea to appoint people to cabinet who are not actually elected, you know, not actually MPs. Now,
or in the House of Lords,
or indeed,
yes,
okay. Or indeed.
I was going to say.
Now, I have to say I see this one from 2 sides. The one is to say that the trouble with people who are elected is that what it tends to be the case is that their primary skill is in getting elected. Their secondary skill is in getting re-elected. Their tertiary skill, if you're bloody lucky, might just happen to involve being of some actual bloody use once elected. So I can see that putting people in place who haven't had to go through the rigmarole of all that, you know, it takes on average apparently it costs on average about £18,000 to run a successful election campaign. I know we've got that, but that doesn't mean they haven't got the experience and the expertise and the skill set and the wisdom to actually be effective. So some things about what Mr. Farage says do make sense, but they do go massively against the grain of the way that this country has always been governed. Okay, then again, that's kind of their gig. So you can see that. You can see that. The other side of it clearly is to just point out that, I mean, how on earth are you going to have any kind of democratic accountability in that sort of situation? It's not as though it hasn't been trialed in a similar way before. I mean, what did Rishi Sunak do? He ennobled Lord Cameron, and then purely to put him in office in the cabinet as Foreign Secretary. But then he wasn't able to be questioned in the House of Commons, so he had to send a delegate or a representative or something like that to have that done, which is what I would call suboptimal. You see, so when they get in, assuming which they probably will, they're going to have to find a way of trying to actually get the right people around the table.
Yeah.
A lot of those will either be inexperienced or will have the primary skill of getting elected.
I mean, yeah.
And that's been the problem all along. So go on.
Well, I was going to say my mum.
Peter, I do have to stress something very important.
Yes.
In the constitutional setup,
Yes.
a government with a majority, an absolute majority, is more powerful than a president in any presidential system. Parliamentary sovereignty, yeah, there are some sort of blockages, but if you push past them, we are basically a parliamentary dictatorship.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, it's quite funny because I remember back when Rishi Sunak was trying to push through the legislation to basically by law say Rwanda's a safe country to get the Rwanda plan off the ground. Didn't intend that pun. I think it was Ken Clarke who went into the Lords to say, "Oh, Parliament can't just say red is green and make that law." And it's like, actually, yeah, they can. Parliament is sovereign. It would just be stupid, and no one would vote for that.
Moderated by five. Moderated by five, and that is it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, so it is very powerful, but as you say, you need to do it properly. And I mean, what I was going to say is I've been talking to my mum quite a bit about politics since I've started this podcast, which is for the normies. But one of her blockers for trusting reform, oddly enough, is actually not having enough people who have experience in cabinet. So I pointed out Danny Kruger. Mum's like, yes, he's very impressive, but that's one person. And I've always been of the side of, I don't think we'll need that many Tories, but I'm thinking probably actually need quite a few ex-cabinet ministers if the general public are going to trust them. Because it's true, if you're inexperienced with the civil service, yeah, you'll get Trump 1.0. But if you have people who know how the civil service works and the tricks they play, there's a lot more of a chance of being more like Trump 2.0, where actually you're quite effective.
Well, I think this is not unusual, really, is it? Well, why do we have Trump 2.0? Because he learned from Trump 1.0. You know, so this is the thing. But as you say, a reform government getting in is going to have to deal with the fact that actually, you know, it was not dissimilar to the 2019 election when a whole lot of Tories got voted in who didn't actually expect to get voted in.
Yeah.
You know, and so then you had a whole load of constituency MPs who didn't actually expect to become MPs, and then they did. So then you end up with a situation where this is the thing, you know, depends what your majority actually is. If you're, like I said, there's about 100 plus ministerial posts.
Yeah.
And what have we got with the Tories now? Well, pretty much everyone's going to get one as a shadow because there's not enough of them not to. And if they do get reduced to what was the latest polling, something like 16, 17 seats, I mean, it's like with the Lib Dems after 2015. I mean, what is the point of them even being there? You know, that kind of thing. You can fit them all in a people carrier, that kind of thing. You know, so you're going to have that problem. But reform certainly is going to face the issue of how it appoints people to positions. What I have noticed from their recent press conferences is that they've been appointing people who are experienced, people, you know, so people who run prisons, for example.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Who you can use within, whether or not they're the secretary, be used within the Justice Department, the Ministry of Justice. You can use that. They've appointed quite a lot of other people who are experienced in other areas. Now, this is a good strategy in principle. But if practically none of them have political experience, they're going to find out very quickly that, and just as I have found out, you know, it doesn't really matter how good you are, how much you know, how much experience you have. If you don't know how to game the system, you're going to get nowhere. And that's the problem, prospectively, that a future reform government, which according to current polling is likely, is going to face. But you mentioned earlier also that, yes, I mean, they may end up in coalition with the Conservatives. So what do we then end up with? We end up with a party that's in power that may need to rely upon the crutch of people who've actually experienced what it's like doing this. But that is somewhat stymied by the fact that, well, they basically said they want to destroy them. So it's, you know, I mean, then again, how the hell did we end up with Liberal Democrats, for God's sake, in coalition with the Conservatives?
Well,
and I actually think I'll just finish in a minute that I'm not a big fan of the former Deputy Prime Minister Nick Clegg, but when people have said of him, "Oh, he sold out," I don't really see it like that, because the reality was we were coming out of a financial crash, a crisis, a recession on an unprecedented scale. And if you add the numbers up, had you tried to do a Lib Lab coalition, for example, you still wouldn't have had a majority. In some senses, he stepped up for his country and went, broke some of his promises, like the not raising the tuition fees, that kind of thing, which everyone hates him for now. But you think, well, actually, had he not stepped up, then what the hell would have happened? We would have had a hung parliament in 2010 at a time when we had a major financial crisis going on, and there'd be nobody to deal with it. Nobody with a functioning majority to actually deal with it. So I actually have more respect for him than a lot of people on this side of the coin might suggest.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I wasn't one of the people who was relying on having no fee. Well, I wasn't even aware of the no tuition fees whatsoever. How old would I have been? 14. Really wasn't into politics at all. I didn't really care about it. I hoped I'd never have to care about it, but here we are. And I don't really see reacting to reality. You're in a financial crisis. Of course, you can't pay for everyone's student fees. What are you talking about? I don't see that as a massive backstab, really, as a lot of millennials seem to. But well, if you promise free things and you don't get it, yes, I suppose you don't react to it well.
So. The problem is a lot of people do see it like that, because they only look at manifestos, and then it turns, and it's okay. So facing reality, and there are various examples recently of people facing reality. Liz Truss, for 7 minutes,
weeks, yeah,
but facing reality is actually not that easy. And in fact, if we just draw all of this all the way back to the budget, which we were supposed to be talking about, this is Rachel Reeves's attempt to face reality, but only on her own terms. And that's a very clear point that I want to make. It only works if it's on her terms, as far as she's concerned. If there's any reason to remove her as Chancellor, it is that one. It would seem to be they've got, certain terms that they need, that they won't break. It would appear that manifesto commitments are not the kind of terms that they feel like not breaking. But there are other ones that are largely ideological that apparently they're quite willing to break. Let's hear from Simon.
This brings us back to the fact that this has been a massive appeasement of their backbenchers, particularly with the end of the two-child benefit cap.
Yeah.
There's no limit. They have just unleashed the absolute tidal wave of benefits claims of this.
Well, on top of that as well, Clive Lewis was being interviewed on the Daily Tea and basically saying, "Oh, this doesn't actually go far enough." So the left of the Labour Party aren't even satiated with this. They're just, it could have gone more though. We need to tax the rich even more. What are they doing?
Well, I mean, as somebody who's very familiar with that lot, they're never satiated, so I wouldn't be overly surprised.
Why even bother? Oh, I guess because they want to stay in power. Fair enough.
Well, yes, and it's sort of like we're doing the bare minimum to stave off that lot. That's basically what they're doing, and there's a lot of stuff in this budget that it is basically what that is. And you can indeed the removal of the two-child benefit cap. It is literally just. I can't even call it virtue signaling. It's just.
It's so cynical.
It is in purest form.
So again?
Red meat in its purest form, emphasis on the red.
Yeah, red meat.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, while still on the budget, I suppose quickly mention Kemi Badenoch did quite well in her response. Having said that, she did have a month to prepare because all of this got leaked. So you just make bullet points and replies and then cross off the ones that turned out didn't make it to the budget. Plus they had 40 minutes before because it got leaked by the OBR. Which, what's there to say about that? Someone's getting fired, and the OBR's as much of a joke as they always were. So,
well, actually, somebody is going to get.
What's that, Simon?
Somebody gone.
Have you heard how this apparently happened?
No, go on.
Oh, I saw somewhere several times that apparently somebody was working from home abroad, and that they were 2 hours ahead in that time zone. I don't know if this is true, but apparently this is what happened. They were 2 hours ahead in the foreign time zone, and they sent the document out when they thought it was meant to go out, but actually it was early.
I'm going to err on the side of I can't imagine many people. I can't imagine they would delegate that to someone who was working abroad from home.
Well,
around budget time.
What reminds me of is, and this was years and years ago now, but the winner of oh god, what it was like Great British Bake Off or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Was leaked by one of the presenters because she was in a different time zone and she didn't realize that actually, she thought it was backwards rather than forwards or the other way around or something like that. It was one of those. These are the kinds of administrative mistakes that happen, but the reality is we all knew roughly what was coming in the budget anyway, because like I said, what you hear about 40 minutes before it happened, I mean, as you say, most of what was in it would have been shared with the opposition about a month or so before anyway. So it's sometimes we need to not make too much of leaks, Well,
I suppose it depends on the leaks. I mean, I think I prefer the days where the budget all came out at once, and if you leak anything, you resign out of honour. But I mean, the cynical part of me thinks that a lot of this was leaked to effectively have the market fluctuations happen in advance. Because the markets, the leak happened early, had a bit of a dip in the gilts, and they went back up, and then it basically stabilised around where it was before. And I just thought, yeah, but that's because they were fluctuating over the past month from all these leaks. So you don't get brownie points and say, oh, the market's quite like this one. No, the market's already reacted, and they didn't like it because you leaked everything.
Well, this is the thing. I mean, it looks as though the gilt market has stabilised, the bond market has stabilised. The pound has actually slightly risen against the dollar.
Yeah.
And so people are now using that to say, oh, look, it wasn't actually that bad. But there was an analysis from somebody I'm not a massive fan of, but I'll go into it anyway. Faisal Islam of Channel 4 repute did, in fact, give out, I'm just reading through it now because I'm going to use it on my phone, that, his headline is "The Real Reason Reeves is Making You Pay More Tax." And he highlights the fact there is no precedent for leaks on this scale within that time frame. But his overall analysis, I'm going to quote from it: "The net result of all that is the OBR forecast shows she could have met her self-imposed rules of only borrowing to invest and cover day-to-day spending with tax receipts without freezing income tax threshold." So he mentions that. So then he asks the question, why did she do more than expected and freezing the thresholds and that sort of thing? He goes into some detail about how maybe she didn't actually need to do this, but what he then analyzes is, what is this about? This is about breathing space. And is what I talked about earlier in terms of kicking the can down the road. What this allows her to do, despite hammering working people, to borrow their term, now, is it kicks the can down the road in the sense that, it stabilizes the markets. It's almost the reverse Liz Truss. So it stabilizes the markets, yes, but it is going to hit a lot of people, quite hard. He says this is about buying breathing space politically and economically. The two factors are inseparable. That's what he says. He talks about shoring up their immediate position. And I'll leave it there, but He mentions it's also come at a price, and yes, it has. But it's more about saying, well, yeah, this is a government that is barely trying to stay afloat, in more ways than one. In more ways than one, both economically but also politically. Probably also looking over their shoulder at what happened to Liz Truss when she decided to shake things up, and then that didn't work. We have to then consider what happens if a reform government gets in, and oh dear, that kind of thing. So this budget basically, it does hammer working people, but what it is also doing is trying to keep the bond market stabilized. Now, I was speaking with, and I will not name this source, like we say in journalism, you tell me your sources, I'll tell you mine. No, we do. We do. But we're saying it was probably a deal that was agreed in advance between the Chancellor, the Chancellor's office, the Treasury, HM Treasury, that is to say, and the financial markets, such that this is something we will not buck.
Well,
I have that on good authority, but I shall say nothing further.
Well, I mean, maybe the New Statesman are right. Maybe there are bond market vigilantes, or maybe, as we said, this is just facing up to reality, and this is the only path that Labour could go down. Very much one of those budgets where everyone disliked that, and well, it's the Glastonbury budget, as we say. Sounds good, gonna hammer everyone. Sorry, it's not great, but I think. Go on.
Just on that point, that in the markets there is no such thing as anyone who is not a vigilante.
Well, that too, yeah. It's just reality.
It's
the damn
thing.
For you. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's why Gary Stevenson's so cynical. I think these people don't create wealth; they just move it about. Right. I think with that though, that is an hour up. So that was our budget special, I suppose you can say. There was a lot to talk about, to be fair, despite the fact we talked about it all before. But yes, the reaction was also all very much worth going into. So, with that, I would like to thank Simon and Patrick for joining me today.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter.
All right, and with that, thank you all very much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.